Conspiracy theories aren't just for the internet fringe anymore. In a world where institutions lie, cover up, and profit, sometimes the so-called crazy people are just ahead of the curve. Today, we're taking a deeper look at 4 massive conspiracies, ones still being debated, still being suppressed, and still shaping the way millions of Americans see the world. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Same Old Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon. Let's get into some conspiracies. We've all talked about these things, right? The COVID origin, the Epstein files, and so on. So we're going to get into some of these things and discuss why transparency in the government is so darn important and how the American people have lost faith in our legacy media and our government. And I don't know how we're going to get that back. All the while, truth seekers, like those of us that are podcasting, those of us that are asking questions and willing to doubt what we're being told every day, hopefully we can get to the truth in the end. So truth seeking is where it's at. All right, let's go down the list, starting with the most obvious, the COVID origin. This is the lab leak theory, originated from a lab in Wuhan, possibly through an accidental leak. The narrative of that was suppressed immediately to protect reputations, funding sources, and global diplomacy. So the story that we got, of course, was the wet market theory, right? That a penguin made love to a turtle, as Jon Stewart said, and somehow that virus got onto the human strain, and then, of course, worldwide pandemic. All the while, there happens to be the Wuhan Institute of Virology is located right at the epicenter of the pandemic, and the rest is history. So the NIH funded gain of function research through EcoHealth Alliance was documented in the FOIA requests. Fauci originally denied any relationship there, funding gain of function research, but later email suggested he privately entertained the lab origin idea early on, and then of course changed his tune, which he did about many things. Media and big tech labeled it a conspiracy all the way until 2023, which was crazy because the conspiracy of the origin story was happening almost immediately, right? Was that the outbreak was in Wuhan, the lab was in Wuhan. I mean, the moment anyone got wind that lab existed, it was pretty easy to connect those two dots, right? So why doubt it? Why can't we ask the simple question? Doctors were disappearing, journalists were disappearing in China, all sorts of crazy stuff. So anyway, finally in 2023, the Department of Energy and FBI admitted it was at least plausible. So of course, then the mainstream media will follow suit and at least admit to the plausibility of it, right? So some questions we could easily ask on this was why were respected scientists and journalists censored for simply asking the questions, right? How are we going to get to the bottom of things if we're never even asking the questions? So if we have the right of free speech here in America, that would include questioning. And it seems pretty obvious to me that questions should be fair game at all times. Also, why was the natural origin pushed so hard when no intermediate host was ever found, right? They were constantly trying to figure out which wet market it was, what the animal was. They were allegedly trying to trace back the origins of the virus to a particular strain of an animal, that sort of thing. And it was just all theory and speculation from day one. And so, why did they just keep pushing that so hard when they weren't getting anywhere? It wasn't that the evidence was leading them to the conclusion. They were just starting with the conclusion and then trying to act like they couldn't find the evidence. And then also, what would it mean for our own government? Also, what would it mean if our own government helped fund the pandemic and then cover it up? So funding gain of function research is obviously problematic. It can be problematic. And what is the purpose of the gain of function research? A lot of people would steer in towards the direction of weaponization, right, of viruses. And that's a sketchy thought. That's sketchier to me than any nuclear conversation. But what do you guys think? Tell me in the comments. So they told us it was a racist conspiracy, meaning talking about the Wuhan the Wuhan virus from China, right? Trump caught all sorts of flack for that him talking about it being like the Wuhan virus was a racist term. So now they say, well, maybe. If that's not gaslighting, what is? So what do you guys think about the origin of COVID? Did it come from the lab? Is it fair game to talk about the lab leak? Were you one of the parties that called someone or referred to someone as racist, even if it was President Trump? Did you refer to someone as racist because they questioned that theory? If so, you might want to do a little self-analysis there and welcome questioning instead of assuming you know all the answers. All right, moving on. Let's get into topic 2. This is as trending as anything is almost every week. Epstein. The core claim of the conspiracy is that Jeffrey Epstein ran a global child trafficking ring with connections to powerful elites and was silenced to protect them. So Jeffrey Epstein obviously allegedly killed himself in jail years ago, back in 2019. And the theory is that no, he did not kill himself. Someone offed him to silence him. So the allegations were that high profile connections, Bill Clinton, all the flights that were alleged, his name was alleged on the flight logs, Prince Andrew, Bill Gates, Wexner, big high profile names, maybe the biggest names you could think of, are suspected in being involved in this ring of what. So that's something that the people really want to know. They want to know that their elites aren't doing these atrocious things and getting away with it. I think that's relevant. I think that's important to know that, hey, we do have some sort of moral high ground here. We do, as a country, we do hold ourselves accountable. We do hold ourselves to certain standards of behavior, and that behavior ain't it. So everyone wants to get to the bottom of this, and they want to know and be reassured that if our top officials are behaving poorly, yes, we're going to be able to hold them accountable. Yet we obviously haven't seen that. In decades, we haven't seen that, no matter what the crimes are that are going on. So the conspiracy, Epstein's death was in 2019. Here are some of the talking points. The cameras in his cell block mysteriously didn't work the night that he was killed. The guards also nodded off and fell asleep and weren't paying attention. The cellmate, his alleged cellmate, was mysteriously transferred that day or the day before, something around that timeline. So what is the official ruling? Suicide. Now, at the same time, Ghislaine, I still don't know how to pronounce her name correctly. Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted of trafficking to no one. The client list remains sealed. They won't give it to us. They won't give us anything. So what is it that she's being held on? What are her charges? And if there's no victims, if there's no one involved, then what's going on there, right? You hear things about building a case. Hey, we want to build a solid case. Well, okay, great. What is she charged with? Where's her trial? What's going on there? So Epstein, the name Epstein is now shorthand for the rich and powerful get away with anything. There are many examples of that, but that seems to be on the forefront here still in 2025 as I film this. Every American you talk to on the street seems to know he didn't kill himself. I don't see why this is such a contentious issue. Now, I agree that there needs to be due process. I agree that there should be evidence. But when you have a list of items that statistically are just impossible for all the coincidences to happen at the same time, the cameras, the guards, the cellmate, and all of a sudden there's no evidence to demonstrate that, yes, he did kill himself. It should have been the easiest thing to prove possible. Yet now it's, well, all these coincidences, we're just supposed to swallow all these coincidences. And it's not sitting well with the American people. Now, fast forward to within the last 2-3 weeks, we've got Kash Patel, we've got Pam Bondi in office, okay? In early June of 2025, FBI Director Kash Patel and AG Pam Bondi they presented conflicting narratives in the press regarding the release of the new evidence, right? So going into their cabinet nominations, it was all this day one, we're going to release the files, day one talk. And we're 130 plus days in and crickets. There was a leak from James O'Keefe, who released this video that some woman took of Pam Bondi at a restaurant, saying there's so many files. There's tens of thousands of videos of inappropriate acts, right? Of child porn, as she said. And so then within, I think it was 24 hours of James O'Keefe releasing that, she came out and addressed the press and revealed that, yes, they're sifting through, her quote, I think, was sifting through tens of thousands of Epstein-related videos and documentation, promising more disclosures once the victim's privacy is secured. And, you know, I know they don't want to re-victimize the victims, and I think everyone understands that, but why, in the same breath, if there are victims, that means there are perpetrators. And who are those perpetrators, and why aren't they being charged yet? You've got to have ample information. Now, in the same breath, Kash Patel, right? So Pam Bondi is saying we've got tens of thousands of videos of child, maybe crimes, child pornography, tens of thousands of videos that they're sifting through. And that's why they haven't released anything, because they're doing such a thorough job of investigating all this. Now, in the same breath, you've got Kash Patel on Fox News that starts addressing the Epstein death. And he says, and I'm quoting now, "You know a suicide when you see one," and that's what that was. And obviously, he and Dan Bongino were both in that interview, and they both said they reviewed the file and found no explosive conspiracy, and everyone called bull on that interview. People were analyzing their body language, their eye contact, their speech patterns. The world went to buzz, proclaiming that they no longer trusted Kash Patel, and they're wondering why he was towing the line. Was he compromised? Was he just entered into this corrupt system now, and he's just perpetuating that cycle? No one really knows. Kash Patel knows, Dan Bongino probably knows, Pam Bondi knows, but it is certainly a stark contrast from all of their day one, we're going to expose everything narrative, to, 140 days in, and they're saying, oh, no, that was a suicide, nothing to see here. And in the same breath, the other person saying, we've got tens of thousands of videos. It's very confusing. It reeks of cover up to me and most people that I talk to. It just doesn't make sense. What the heck is going on? Now, there could be this minor, tiny little sliver of hope, in the sense that Kash Patel, I'm going to stick to him for just a second. Patel maybe has access to the documents, right? He keeps leaning on the documents, the evidence, the documents. It's like, well, the documents are only as good as the person that wrote them, that collected the evidence and let you see it. So how is he being protected? Is there plausible deniability for him? And that's how he can kind of, with a straight face, go through these interviews on Fox News and on Joe Rogan and talk about this stuff and say, oh, all the evidence that I've seen says it was a suicide. Well, sure, if I hand you a Post-it note that says he killed himself and you read from that, you can say the same thing. Oh, well, the evidence that I saw said that. Well, find the dang evidence, and the coincidence alone of the guards falling asleep, cellmate transferred, cameras going down, all in the same period of time. Sorry, that deserves its own full-fledged investigation, and nobody's ever going to buy that, Kash. Nobody's ever going to buy that. So, but what they could do at a minimum is at least be on the same page, right? Kash Patel and Pam Bondi are two top cops in the country, should at least be on the same page with what narrative they're putting out. And they couldn't even get that right. How is this so twisted in 2025? They know this stuff is going to get beat down all over the internet and in podcasts. There are more journalists than ever. How do they not have that dialed in? It's just mind-blowing to me. Mind-blowing. And the people deserve to know, if high-ranking people are involved in this kind of evil behavior, we should see them persecuted for those crimes. Period. End of story. So Patel suggesting the case is closed with not much left to see. Bondi insisting they're working through data and redacting sensitive content. Okay. Public confusion. If the FBI says case closed, but the DOJ says it's ongoing, which narrative is the public supposed to trust? You know, whether you're watching this story unfold on legacy media or on podcasts and independent journalists, like who are you supposed to believe right now? I mean, again, you can't even get the DOJ and the FBI to align. So how are we supposed to believe anyone? I don't see it. And what are we going to do with the conspiracy, right? This episode is about conspiracies. So of course they're opening, I should say, a vacuum of missing facts. And so if the vacuum isn't filled with factual information and evidence where they're releasing, not necessarily releasing the videos, but hey, we've got a case built. Here it is. XYZ are being charged on these crimes and counts and so on. And so they're creating this vacuum, and we're going to fill that with speculation and questions. Yet feels like half the country on the left tends to demonize anyone that does ask those questions, which is crazy, because when their administration is not in office, right? When the other team is in office, they'll want to ask those same questions. It's like when I'm getting off topic here, but the hypocrisy and the double standard is that, hey, when your administration is in office, you are just happy as a clam and you agree with everything they do. And it's like, what? That's mind-blowing to me. I am happy to call out right now Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, et cetera, on all of their shenanigans, regardless of my support for them or lack thereof. Doesn't matter. Call a spade, no matter what. And that's why we should be discussing individual policies and their evidence-based outcomes, and stop talking about people so much. The position is corrupt because of all the surrounding positions and the infrastructure that they have in place. And bad behavior is what is incentivized within our government. So it's a fallacy to think we're going to put in Kash Patel as the new FBI director, problem solved. Now everything works well. That's proving to not be true, right? Sure, some things can shift and change, but absolutely we're not seeing this mega reform I think a lot of people were hoping for. So that's a fallacy, I think, across all of government, right? Hey, let's install a new president, everything's going to change. Let's install a new Speaker of the House, everything will change. That's obviously not true. I think this is a perfect case study, the Patel-Bondi dynamic, right? This is a perfect case study in controlling the narrative, right? You've got DOJ saying one thing, FBI saying another, and they're conflicting. And that is super confusing, but they're both trying to control the narrative. And what kind of media spin is being put on that? What are we supposed to do as American citizens that are under this umbrella of government, trusting these people to lock up the bad guys, no matter who they are, right? From the president on down, lock them all up. I don't get it. I don't trust it, and they can't even control their own narrative. So you expect me to believe that one of the two stories I'm hearing is true and I'm going to trust that one? Or are you both lying and you just got caught? Yeah, I think I know where I stand. So why won't they release the client list? If Epstein's network is dismantled, where's the proof? Where are they? Where'd they go? What are they doing? It doesn't mean that the crime didn't happen. So why aren't we pursuing that faster and harder? And why does the mainstream media avoid the story? I think we can draw our own conclusions, and this is why conspiracies exist. So this isn't just a conspiracy. It's a red flag that accountability doesn't exist, at least in our elite circles. I think if you or I had those kind of allegations against us and that amount of evidence against us, we would absolutely never see the light of day again. We would be publicly shamed. The media would be all over it, happy to produce all the evidence that they could get their hands on, happy to talk about it 24/7. They would eat that up. But when it's the elite, whom are then controlling the media, and the censorship just trickles down all the way to the bottom. So I am happy that we have the First Amendment, and I am happy that we can kind of produce our own independent journalism at this point and ask these questions. Hopefully one day when enough podcasters, enough journalists ask the questions, enough James O'Keefes of the world dig into things, hopefully the truth comes out eventually. So I encourage everybody to keep seeking the truth. Ask more questions. Don't just toe the line like you trust the media like it's 1995. That's steering you wrong. Okay, moving on. Off of Epstein, moving to the 2020 election integrity, election interference. This is another big kind of conspiracy that I don't even know if this was the biggest conspiracy, but it was more media narrative, media spin. So much manipulation was going on around this at the time. It just involved irregularities and suppression tactics that absolutely undermined the public trust. Nobody knew what the heck was happening in all sorts of different states. Even if you don't believe that the election was outright stolen, you knew shenanigans were going on at a minimum. So what was fueling this conspiracy of a rigged election? So widespread mail-in voting with rushed new procedures under COVID, right? COVID set the stage for everything to change, right? Everybody jumped on Zoom, stay-at-home orders, blah, blah, blah. It was a reason to push mail-in voting for that election. And that was such a massive, massive gaping wound in our election procedure, in my opinion. The open door for fraud is just 10 out of 10 there. And I think it was taken advantage of, and we saw that pretty clearly. Another topic was Zuckerbucks. So over $400 million was spent to fund ballot drop boxes and get out the vote efforts in blue areas. So again, you've got media companies getting heavily financially involved in the election. And we have seen since then how much that can swing the tides. The Hunter Biden laptop story, I think we feel very unfulfilled with. We're totally unsatisfied with the result of this. We haven't had this final conclusion on this story yet, still here in June of 2025. That story was breaking and proved to be completely true leading into that 2020 election, yet it got banned completely. It got completely smothered in the news cycle. It got squashed on Twitter. It couldn't get any traction. And they've done polls since then, had that story been made public, most people agree that Biden victory would not have happened. And still to this day, we don't have transparency on the Hunter Biden laptop story. We would still like to see the full weight and gravity of what was on that laptop and all the evidence that shows Hunter Biden is a dirtbag and not someone to model after. Anyway, I'm getting off track. So Hunter Biden laptop story was part of the 2020 election scandal and conspiracy. So a lot of stuff wrapped into that. Back to the election specifically. So observers were blocked and removed from counting sites repetitively. And that went on in different states, if I remember correctly. And there was video showing that, how people were being, kind of kicked out of these rooms where voting counts were going on. And that seemed crazy at the time. And it was like, but what is anyone doing about it? And of course, after the election, there were lawsuits filed and things, but never quite got to the bottom of a lot of this stuff. And I wish they'd circle back to be transparent and give us the real story at the end of all these things, but they don't. So they just kind of sweep this stuff under the rug, and we never really hear about these things. And even people filing FOIA requests seem to fall flat. They just redact everything. You get page after page of just blacked out information, and you never actually learn anything. So the government having the kind of control that they have and the power, they let you know what they want you to know, whether that's true or not. And if they don't want you to know something, you're never going to find out. And that sucks. We elect these people and they're supposed to be doing our bidding, and they're supposed to be doing what benefits the Americans, not working for themselves, not working for each other. They're supposed to be working for us. And I can't imagine that any of you watching this feel that they are doing that. I can't imagine that you think that they have your best interests in mind. As Thomas Sowell would say, the anointed, right? That they feel so anointed and blessed with the knowledge and the skills and the abilities to decide that their method is what's best for you. You don't know what's best for you. They know what's best for you. And that's just absolutely bonkers. So even if you don't think votes themselves were changed and the count was messed up or that kind of stuff, the rules were changed. And that obviously matters. So why were certain stories banned weeks before the election? Why didn't the courts ever look at the evidence, especially in time, to make proper decisions in real time? And if roles were reversed, would Democrats, I said this earlier, would Democrats trust the outcome if the same tactics were flipped? So if Trump had won and Republicans at voting stations were being flooded with late night, just batches and batches of mail-in ballots, and all of a sudden the Republican numbers are ticking up, and Republicans were in the counting room and keeping Democrats out, would everybody be cool with that? Everybody's still copacetic? Everybody's happy? No, I don't think so. And that's why we need to hold both parties to the same standard at all times, whether it's due to criminal activity, voting practices, interference, whatever it is. We've just got to see some accountability here. We've got to see some enforcement. And we don't. How do we get these politicians held accountable? I don't know that we can without major reform. I don't think it's a person that's going to go in office and all of a sudden risk their political gain and advantage to hold anyone to account. They're just going to toe the line, get into the same system, and just keep on going so that their career ticks up and up and up, and they can cash in at the end of the day. Versus, hey, I'm going to go in and commit political suicide, right? Your career is going to bomb because you're going to say things that people don't like because they aren't feelings. They are based in evidence-based facts and evidence-based results. And so you go in there with logic and reasoning and you gut the system and change it and incentivize it for positive outcomes, not just what feels good. You're going to tank politically. And that is such a shame that the majority of the country can't get behind recognizing that doing something just because it feels good, even though the result doesn't happen, or worse, is even counterproductive, is mind-blowing to me. And I wish people were smarter. When big tech, big media, big government all silence the same story, you are not in a democracy anymore. You are in a narrative machine. You are a part of the propaganda cycle. So good luck coming out of that. And that's why I said you shouldn't trust mainstream media anymore. And I would highly encourage you to doubt and question everything coming from the government as well. Okay, moving on. Topic number 4, big pharma. I'm big on this one myself personally because I've been in the fitness and wellness space for a long time. I care about health. And so I despise the fact that they would tank our country's health for profit. And that's exactly what this stuff is about. So, vaccine profiteering and control. The core claim to vaccine conspiracies is pharmaceutical companies manipulated science, censored dissent, and used government muscle to turn a global crisis into a massive profit engine. We all know how much big pharma profited during the pandemic, the plandemic. Pfizer and Moderna profits soared into the tens of billions of dollars in a crazy short amount of time, y'all. No liability for vaccine manufacturers. They're protected under emergency use. That seems sketchy, right? That's what I was just mentioning. That is a policy that feels good, right? Let's get an emergency vaccine out there. Let's get an emergency jab out there, even though it hasn't gone through the proper testing that any of us would actually want it to go through before we become subjects. And so protecting them is mind-blowing to me. whether that's emergency use or not. We're going to get more into that. Natural immunity. This is mind blowing, right? Natural immunity was dismissed very early on. And anyone that knows anything about the human body and virus and immunology knows that natural immunity is the gold standard. And for that to have been suppressed made anyone with any common sense immediately doubt anything else they were telling you regarding the jab and regarding immunity. Like anyone and everyone knows that. So how they believe that they could, I don't know, kind of plant that seed of doubt in your mind is mind-blowing to me. How could they have faith in that themselves? The audacity there is just 10 out of 10. Public health officials flip-flopped repeatedly, yet dissenters were banned. So when we could all think of examples here, when certain doctors came out and said, hey, that's not working, right? Ventilators are killing all the patients. Let's not go through this ventilator protocol. Let's try these other things. We're seeing success over here with certain key drugs, right? The ivermectin and so on. The moment a doctor came out and said that, they were banned. They were pulled off of Twitter. They would lose their license. All sorts of stuff was going on all throughout the country, and I would almost say throughout the world. And then you would see even Dr. Fauci himself, right? At first, he was saying, hey, masks are ridiculous. They don't work. That's not how they're intended to be used. And then, of course, that flipped all the way to a point where he was wearing 3 masks, right? Triple masking by the end. So stupid. And people were buying into the stuff hook, line, and sinker, unfortunately, because they're supposed to be the trusted resource guiding us through hard times. Still no accountability for Dr. Fauci. And in the end, the alleged auto pen from President Biden signed off on Dr. Fauci's pardon. So will we ever see any accountability for, in my opinion, the crimes that have been committed against the world, not just America, but the world? So also alternative treatments, ivermectin and everything else was mocked, not studied, banned. I mean, look at what they did to Joe Rogan, when he came out and kind of did his little selfie video when he had COVID and explained to the world and his followers what protocol he applied to himself and how good he was feeling and the tactics that they used to try to bury Joe Rogan. And they put like this yellow filter on him to make him look sickly and that sort of stuff. And they, obviously referred to it as horse dewormer and everything. And just what a mess. And no accountability for the media, for Dr. Fauci, for NIH. Just do whatever they want and get away with it. So, all that being said, people were forced to choose, and I do mean forced, right? Forced to choose between a rushed shot and losing their job in many, many, many industries across the world, but definitely here in America. What a shame. I mean, that's a crime against humanity, in my opinion. Then, after they took this risky jab, eventually it was kind of like, oops, you can still catch COVID and you can still spread COVID. The famous Rachel Maddow bit where it's like, look, get the shot and you won't catch COVID and you won't spread COVID. And that was all false. But if you said that, you were canceled. So, questions. Why can't you sue a vaccine company? That's absolutely bonkers to me. Thankfully, RFK Jr. is being pretty aggressive in this department these days. I wish him the best of luck to take down as much of Big Pharma as he possibly can. We should have, as consumers, full accountability within our grasp. If you tell me you're going to inject something into me and it's going to provide protection against X, but then I suffer all of these horrible injuries, why are they not accountable for that? Especially if they didn't inform me, they didn't do the testing and so on. Like, absolutely should be accountable for that. And I understand there's risk. Everything medically, in my opinion, is risk reward, right? Hey, what risks do I face if I don't pursue this vaccine? And what are the rewards if I do pursue it, right? So if I do pursue a vaccine and I choose to do that and there's informed consent about all the risks and I still pursue that, well then, okay, I maybe own those risks, assuming I was given factual information. And I've got to weigh that against, well, what if I don't pursue it? And that's no different than the flu shot. That's no different than taking ibuprofen for a headache or anything else for that matter. The moment that you start relying on chemistry for things, you have to do your own risk reward matrix when it comes to the health of your body. And I'd encourage you all to do so. I want you all to be informed. So another question, why were conversations about side effects so heavily policed? Why were the stories of massive vaccine injuries being buried immediately? And I would say up until this point, also in perpetuity. That's a major problem. If you try to convince the world to take this shot and a good percentage of injuries start happening and people start voicing those injuries, that should be mainstream news, right? Let other people hear those stories. Yet that narrative got buried. That wasn't even a narrative. That was just people sharing their experience, and that got policed to near zero. You had to seek out those stories and alternative media sources. So another question, what does it say when science becomes marketing, right? Because I think that's what we have now in big pharma. The fact that they can advertise directly to consumers is something unique about our country. The fact that they invent the names of diseases after they figured out that a drug does something, right? Then they go back and they work backwards and they say, oh, that's the name of the condition. That's the name of the disease that this drug is for. And that seems nutty to me as well. So how do we delineate between science and marketing? And we are also always asking, who's funding this research, right? Hey, did Coca-Cola, Big Sugar, fund diabetes research? Did they fund, this low fat campaign back in the 50s? And that became, the kind of the new food guide pyramid. The history there is super scary, and that stuff's still going on. And that's crazy to me. That stuff needs to be fixed, in my opinion. So when the same people making the shot also control the narrative, that's not medicine, that's monopoly. Don't fall victim to that. Pay attention, folks. Do a nickel's worth of research. Do not just believe everything you see in the news. You don't have to believe every theory, but ask yourself, why are we even here? Why are millions of Americans turning to podcasts, Reddit, Substacks, instead of the institutions that are supposed to inform and protect us? It's not because they want to believe crazy things. It's because they want to know the truth. And they know they're not getting it from the top. This episode isn't just supposed to be about those 4 big conspiracies. It's about how information is handled. The Patel Bondi example illustrates it beautifully. When red flags are flagged by contradictory leaders, people are naturally going to start questioning. Even friendly voices, even the ones you maybe voted for, can look like they're hiding something, especially when their scripts don't match. So the lesson here, openness and consistency matter to us more than headlines. You don't need a dark conspiracy for distrust to flourish. You just need inconsistent messages from the top. When the FBI and the DOJ tell us different stories, that's when the podcast listeners start piecing together the shadow puzzles themselves. All right, y'all, that's going to wrap it up for today. Look, you don't have to believe every conspiracy we talked about, but you should believe this. When the people in charge lie, censor, and contradict each other, they create the perfect storm for distrust. That's not a theory. That is just history repeating itself. If this episode made you think or maybe ticked you off just enough, do me a favor. Share it with someone who's still trusting the system like it's 1995. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, like, leave a review, hit that follow button. We're going to keep calling out the nonsense, left, right, or deep state. This has been the Same Old Podcast, where we don't do crazy unless it keeps coming true.